Gavin checked his Rolex, annoyed that destroying my life was taking longer than a lunch break. His mother, Priscilla, adjusted her pearls and whispered something that made them both smirk. A shared, toxic little secret. They thought the judge was about to leave me penniless. They thought I was the same fragile, clueless wife who couldn't balance a checkbook. They didn't know I'd spent the last 18 months memorizing their felonies. I stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 photographers. That was aggressive, even for Priscilla. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll, the kind you get when you miss a step on a staircase in the dark. I gripped the handle of my purse until the leather bit into my palm. I knew exactly who had called them. Priscilla had probably sent a group text to her entire contact list before her morning coffee. She wanted this documented. She wanted the high-resolution evidence of Cecilia Bennett, the charity case who married up, walking out of court with nothing but a suitcase of used clothes and a profound sense of shame. I forced my legs to move. Right foot, left foot. Keep the chin down. Don't look at the lenses. Cecilia, darling. The voice cut through the humidity like a serrated knife. Priscilla was waiting near the security checkpoint, looking immaculate in a cream-colored suit that cost more than my father made in a year. She didn't look like a woman about to watch her son dissolve a marriage. She looked like she was hosting a garden party. She stepped forward, blocking my path to the metal detectors. I stopped. I had to stop. The old reflex to defer to her, to pause and wait for her permission to exist, was still hardwired into my muscles. You look... She trailed off, her eyes scanning me from my hairline to my sensible heels. She made a small, sympathetic noise in her throat. Oh, honey, you look so flushed. Are you handling the heat okay? She reached into her Hermes bag and pulled out a packet of tissues. She held one out to me, pinching it between 2 manicured fingers as if I were something contagious. Here, for your forehead. You're glistening, dear. We wouldn't want the cameras to catch you looking frantic. I stared at the tissue. My brain was screaming. I wanted to slap her hand away. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't sweating because of the heat. I was sweating because I was wearing a wire even though I wasn't today. I was sweating because the sheer volume of lies I was carrying in my head felt heavy enough to crush my spine. If I took the tissue, I was admitting I was a mess. If I refused it, I was being rude, and Priscilla punished rudeness with weeks of passive-aggressive silence. I took the tissue. Thank you, Priscilla, I said. My voice sounded thin, reedy. I hated it. Of course, she said, her smile tightening just enough to show teeth, but not warmth. We just want this to be dignified, for everyone's sake. Gavin is already inside with Damien. Try not to make a scene today, all right? He has a meeting at 3. A meeting at 3. Of course. Divorcing me was just an item on his calendar, slotted somewhere between a site inspection and a golf game. I'll do my best, I lied. I dabbed my dry forehead with the tissue, performing the role of the nervous, defeated ex-wife. I needed them to believe it. I needed them to think I was walking into that courtroom to beg for scraps. If they saw the rage underneath the panic, they might actually look at the files my lawyer was carrying. And if they looked at the files, they would run. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The memory hit me as I walked through the metal detector. The smell of stale government air conditioning was replaced by the scent of lavender and expensive fabric. I was standing on a pedestal in a boutique that didn't have price tags on the dresses. My reflection stared back at me, younger, wider-eyed, and terrified. I was 24 and I was trying to convince myself that this is what lucky girls felt like. Turn, Priscilla commanded from the velvet armchair. I turned. The silk rustled. The dress was a structured, heavy thing with a high neck and long sleeves. It was beautiful in an architectural way, like a building you admired but didn't want to live in. It felt like armor. It felt like a cage. It's a lot of fabric, I ventured softly. I looked at the sales associate, a woman named Margot, who had been pinning the hem for 20 minutes. Do you have anything with a lower back? Or maybe something lighter?" Priscilla set down her champagne glass. The sound of crystal hitting the glass table was a sharp clink that silenced the room. "Cecilia," she said, her voice dropping to that confidential, helpful tone she used when she was about to destroy your self-esteem. "We have to be realistic about your silhouette." I froze. My hands went to my hips instinctively. "My silhouette?" "You have a lovely, sturdy figure," Priscilla said, smiling benevolently. "But you don't have the frame for those wispy, modern things. You need structure. You need something that holds you in. We don't want the guests whispering that you look uncontained." Uncontained. I looked in the mirror again. I didn't see a sturdy figure. I saw a size 6 woman who liked running and yoga. But under Priscilla's gaze, I felt like a heifer stumbling into a china shop. I felt wide and clumsy and wrong. "Gavin loves my shoulders," I said, a weak attempt at rebellion. He said, "Gavin loves you," Priscilla interrupted, standing up and walking over to me. She placed her hands on my shoulders, her thumbs pressing into my collarbones. "And because he loves you, he wants you to look appropriate. He's marrying into a certain level of scrutiny, Cecilia. You're representing the family now. We can't have you looking like you're trying to seduce the groomsmen." She smoothed the heavy silk over my chest, effectively buttoning me up. "This is elegant," she decided. "It says wife, not girlfriend. Do you understand the difference?" I looked at the sales associate. Margot looked away, pretending to be fascinated by a tray of pins. I was alone. If I argued, I was being ungrateful. Priscilla was paying for the dress. Priscilla was paying for the wedding. Priscilla was paying for my transition from a graphic designer in a studio apartment to Mrs. Gavin Foster. "I understand," I said. "Good." She patted my cheek. "Wrap it up, Margot. We'll take this one." I stood there while they unzipped me, feeling the cold air hit my skin. I wanted to say no. I wanted to grab my jeans and run out the door, but I did the math. The venue deposit was $20,000. The catering was $15,000. I had $300 in my checking account. I couldn't afford to have an opinion. I let them dress me up like a doll, telling myself that marriage was about compromise. I didn't know yet that compromise was just a fancy word for submission. 6 months into the marriage, I thought I had found a way to breathe again. I was sitting at the dining room table, my laptop open, sketching a logo for a local bakery. It was small work, freelance under the table, but it was mine. The owner, a sweet woman named Elena, had loved my portfolio. She offered me $2,000 for a full branding package. $2,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was money I didn't have to ask Gavin for. It was money that wouldn't appear on the credit card statement that Priscilla reviewed to help us budget. The front door opened. The heavy thud of Gavin's briefcase hitting the floor echoed in the foyer. "Hey," I called out, closing the laptop lid halfway. "Dinner's in the oven. Roast chicken." Gavin walked in, loosening his tie. He looked tired. He always looked tired, carrying the weight of his real estate empire like a cross. He kissed the top of my head, smelling of scotch and expensive cologne. "Smells good," he said. He glanced at the laptop. "What's this? Browsing shoes?" "No," I said, straightening up. I felt a spark of pride. "Actually, I landed a client. That new bakery on 4th Street. They want me to do their logo and menus." Gavin paused. He walked over to the sidebar and poured himself a drink. The ice clinked against the glass. "The bakery?" he asked, turning around. "You mean the place with the crumbling brickwork? I give that place 6 months before the health inspector shuts it down." "It's a start," I said, my smile faltering. "And they're paying me." $2,000. Gavin chuckled. It wasn't a mean laugh exactly. It was the kind of laugh you give a toddler who shows you a drawing of a horse that looks like a potato. "Babe," he said, walking over and sitting next to me. He took my hand. "That's cute, really. But $2,000? I made that in interest while I was driving home." I pulled my hand away slightly. It's not about the money, Gavin. It's about working. I'm bored during the day. I want to contribute. You do contribute, he said soothingly. You run the house. You keep my mother off my back. That's a full-time job. He took a sip of his drink. Look, I just don't want you stressing yourself out over pennies. What happens when they want a revision at 5 p.m. and we have a dinner reservation? Or when you're up late vectoring, or whatever you call it, and you're too tired to host? I can manage my time, I insisted. It's just a logo. It's a distraction, he corrected gently. You know we're trying to project a certain image right now. Investors look at everything. If my wife is hustling for scraps from a failing bakery, it looks like I can't provide for you. It looks desperate. He stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Just tell them you're too busy, he threw over his shoulder. Focus on the house. Mom mentioned the guest room curtains look a bit faded. Why don't you make that your project? I sat there, staring at the half-closed laptop. I wanted to scream that my degree was in graphic design, not curtain selection. I wanted to tell him that $2,000 was freedom, but then the overthinking engine kicked in. If I took the job, he would resent it. Every time I worked, he would sigh. If dinner was 5 minutes late, he would blame the bakery. He would make me feel small until I quit anyway. I opened the laptop. I typed an email to Elena telling her my schedule had unexpectedly filled up. I deleted the draft 3 times before I sent it. Then I went into the kitchen to check on the chicken, feeling like I had just carved off a piece of my soul and served it on a platter. The stress didn't go away just because I stopped working. It just went underground. It settled in my stomach, in the tension of my jaw, in the way I ground my teeth at night. A year later, I was arranging flowers in the foyer, lilies because Priscilla said roses were cliché, when the world tilted sideways. 1 minute, I was cutting a stem. The next, the black and white tiles of the floor were rushing up to meet my face. I woke up on the sofa. Priscilla was hovering over me, waving smelling salts under my nose. The smell was acrid, burning my sinuses. She's awake, Priscilla announced to someone I couldn't see. Thank goodness. I thought she'd cracked her head open on the marble. I tried to sit up. The room spun. What happened? You fainted, dear, Priscilla said, pressing a cold compress to my forehead. Her voice was dripping with that terrifying sweetness. Just dropped like a stone. I've been telling Gavin you look peaked. Gavin was standing by the fireplace, looking more annoyed than worried. He checked his phone. I have to get back to the office, he said. Is she okay? She's fine, just fragile, Priscilla answered for me. She sat on the edge of the sofa and took my wrist, pretending to check my pulse. You know, Gavin, this is exactly what I was worried about regarding the children question. My blood ran cold. What? Well, Priscilla lowered her voice to a theatrical whisper. If Cecilia can't handle arranging flowers without collapsing, how on earth is her body going to handle a pregnancy? Some women just aren't constitutionally built for it. It's simply biology. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick. I just stood up too fast. I skipped lunch. Because you were anxious, Priscilla corrected. I saw you fidgeting earlier. You're so high-strung, darling. It takes a toll on the system. Gavin, maybe we should put a pin in the nursery plans. We don't want to break her. I looked at Gavin. I begged him with my eyes to defend me, to say that I ran 10 Ks, that I hiked, that I was strong. Gavin shrugged. You're probably right, Mom. She has been overwhelmed lately. The dinner parties seem to wipe her out. Exactly. Priscilla patted my hand. It's for the best. We'll get you some iron supplements and maybe a sedative for the nerves. You just rest. Don't worry about being a mother yet. Let's focus on getting you stable. She made it sound like I was a mental patient. Stable, fragile, broken. I closed my eyes and let the tears leak out, knowing she would interpret them as weakness. I wasn't weak. I was furious. But fury, unlike fainting, was something they would punish. So I lay there and let them write my medical history, turning my exhaustion into a permanent diagnosis of incompetence. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Gavin was in the shower. I could hear the water running, the pipes groaning in the walls. I was in the bedroom, folding laundry. It was a Thursday night, 3 years into the marriage. We were supposed to go out for sushi, but Gavin had come home claiming he had a headache. His phone was sitting on the nightstand. It usually lived in his pocket, or face down on the table, or locked in his briefcase. But tonight, he had been careless. He had left it face up, charging. I wasn't looking for anything. I had trained myself not to look. Investigating my husband felt like a betrayal of the vows I was clinging to. But then the screen lit up. It wasn't a call. It was a text preview. The name at the top wasn't a business contact. It wasn't Mom. It was just Brianna. And the message wasn't about real estate. Missing you. Last night was incredible. When can you get away again? The world didn't spin this time. It stopped. I stood there, holding one of Gavin's crisp white dress shirts, and stared at the glowing rectangle. My heart didn't hammer. It just gave one hard, painful thud and then seemed to pause. Last night, Gavin had told me he was at a zoning board meeting that ran late. He had come home at midnight smelling of mints and exhaustion. I had heated up leftovers for him. I had rubbed his shoulders while he complained about city council bureaucrats. I put the shirt down. My hands were trembling, a fine, high-frequency vibration that I couldn't control. I walked over to the nightstand. I didn't touch the phone. If I touched it, I might drop it. If I picked it up, I would have to acknowledge that my life was a lie. Brianna. Who was Brianna? Was she the blonde intern I'd seen at the Christmas party? Was she the consultant he mentioned last week? Cecilia? The water had stopped. Gavin's voice came from the bathroom. Can you grab me a towel? I forgot to bring a fresh one in. I stared at the phone. The screen went black. The evidence vanished into the digital void. Cecilia? Coming, I said. My voice sounded normal. That was the scariest part. I sounded completely normal. I walked to the linen closet, grabbed a fluffy white towel, and walked to the bathroom door. I handed it to him through the crack. Thanks, babe, he said. No problem, I said. I walked back to the bed. I sat down on the edge of the mattress. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat there and repeated the message in my head over and over again, branding it into my memory. Missing you. Last night was incredible. I wasn't fragile anymore. The weakness Priscilla had diagnosed me with evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot of dread. I needed to know. I needed to see the rest. The next morning, Gavin left for work at 7. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, and walked out the door with his phone in his pocket. I waited until I heard the Mercedes pull out of the driveway. Then I ran to the home office. I didn't have his phone, but I had the internet. I sat down at my computer, the one I was only supposed to use for recipes and shopping, and opened the browser. I went to our cell phone provider's website. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I knew the username. It was his email address. But the password, I tried the obvious ones first. Foster 2019 teen. Incorrect username or password. Gavin Foster Wanand. Incorrect username or password. Riverside. That was his favorite project. Incorrect username or password. I paused. Think, Cecilia. What does he care about? He doesn't care about our anniversary. He doesn't care about my birthday. He cares about money. He cares about winning. I tried success. I tried empire. I tried Priscilla. You have one attempt remaining before your account is locked. The red text flashed on the screen like a siren. I pulled my hands back as if the keyboard was hot. If I locked the account, he would get a notification. He would know someone was trying to get in. He would know it was me. I stared at the screen. Panic was starting to claw at my throat. I couldn't guess it. I wasn't a hacker. I was a graphic designer who folded laundry. I needed another way. I picked up the landline. My hands were shaking so badly I misdialed the customer service number twice. "Thank you for calling provider support. This is Marcus. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said, pitching my voice up, making it wobble. I channeled every ounce of the fragile, helpless wife persona Priscilla had groomed me into. "Hi, Marcus. I'm having such a terrible morning. I'm trying to pay the bill for my husband and I've completely forgotten the password. He's going to be so upset if I don't get this paid on time." "I can help with that, ma'am," Marcus said, sounding bored. "I just need to verify the account holder's name and the PIN number." The PIN number. "Oh, God," I let out a jagged breath. He usually handles this. Is it the last 4 of his social?" "I can't tell you that, ma'am." "Please," I said, letting a sob creep into my voice. "He's in a meeting right now. If I call him, he'll scream at me. He's under so much pressure. I just want to pay the bill. Can't you send a reset link to the email on file? I have access to the home email." There was a long pause. I could hear Marcus typing. "Please," I whispered. "I'm just trying to be a good wife." "All right," Marcus sighed. "Since you're calling from the home phone number listed on the account, I can send a password reset link to the primary email, but you'll need to log in within 10 minutes. "Thank you," I breathed. "Thank you so much, Marcus." I hung up. I opened Gavin's email. He never logged out on the home computer because he thought I was too stupid to look. The email popped up. "Reset your password." I clicked it. I changed the password to Gavin, 234. Something he might actually use, something that wouldn't raise flags if he tried to log in later. Password updated. I logged into the mobile account. I navigated to usage details. I filtered by text data. And there it was, a list of numbers, hundreds of them. But one number appeared over and over again, late at night, early in the morning, while I was cooking dinner, while I was sleeping next to him. 555 0119 2844. I didn't have a name yet, but I had a number, and for the first time in 3 years, I had something Gavin Foster didn't have. I had the truth. I needed to see where he was going. The call log was just data. I needed physical proof. 2 days later, Gavin announced he had a site visit in the city. He put on his charcoal suit, the one he wore when he wanted to impress investors, not construction foremen. He checked his hair in the hallway mirror 3 times. "Don't wait up," he said, adjusting his tie. "It's going to be a late one." "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "Drive safe." As soon as his Mercedes backed out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys. I didn't have a luxury car. I drove a 6-year-old sedan that Gavin insisted we keep because it was sensible and paid off, even though the engine made a rattling sound that set my teeth on edge. It was another way of keeping me in my place. He drove the success story, I drove the budget. I followed him at a distance. I kept 2 cars between us, just like I'd seen in movies. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. I was terrified he would look in his rearview mirror and see me. I was terrified of what I would do if he stopped. We were 5 miles from the house, merging onto the highway, when my car shuddered. It wasn't a subtle noise. It was a loud, metallic thunk, followed by a violent pull to the right. The steering wheel jerked in my hands. "No," I whispered, gripping the wheel. "No, no, no, not now." I watched the taillights of Gavin's Mercedes get smaller and smaller as they disappeared into the flow of traffic. He was gone. He was driving toward his mistress, toward his secrets, and I was wrestling a dying car onto the shoulder of the interstate. I slammed the brakes and came to a stop in the gravel. The hazard lights clicked. Tick, 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 mocking me. I got out. It was starting to rain, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked through my blouse in seconds. The front passenger tire was shredded, not just flat, destroyed. I stood there on the side of the highway, semi-trucks blasting past me with gusts of wind that threatened to knock me over, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit in the mud and cry until someone saved me, but no one was coming to save me. Gavin would ask why I was on the highway. Priscilla would say this was proof I couldn't handle machinery. I opened the trunk. I dug out the jack and the tire iron. I had never changed a tire in my life. Gavin always called ALA, but I couldn't call ALA because the account was linked to his phone. He would get the notification. I knelt in the mud. The lug nuts were rusted tight. I put the tire iron on the first one and pulled. It didn't move. I pulled harder, gritting my teeth, feeling the metal dig into my palms. Nothing. I thought about Gavin laughing at my little projects. I thought about Priscilla handing me a tissue because I was sweating. I stood up and stomped on the tire iron with my heel. It slipped. I scraped my shin against the bumper, tearing skin. "Damn it!" I screamed, the sound lost in the roar of traffic. I did it again. I jumped on the wrench, putting my entire body weight into it. The nut gave a screech of protest and turned. I spent the next 45 minutes in the rain, wrestling with the jack, fighting the rusted bolts, ruining my clothes, and breaking 2 fingernails. By the time the spare was on, I was soaked, bleeding, and covered in grease. I looked like a feral animal, but the tire was on. I had done it. I got back in the car, shivering so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. I had lost Gavin, but I had found something else. I had found out that I could survive without them. The failed surveillance mission taught me a brutal lesson. I was underfunded. I couldn't follow Gavin if I couldn't buy gas without him seeing the charge. I couldn't hire a lawyer if I had $0 in my name. The $300 in my secret stash wouldn't last a week. I needed cash, untraceable, cold, hard cash. I walked into my closet and looked at the top shelf. There, in pristine dust bags, sat my gifts from Priscilla. Every birthday and Christmas, Priscilla gave me a designer handbag. She never asked what I liked. She bought what she liked, or what she thought a foster wife should carry. They were ugly, ostentatious things covered in logos, stiff leather that felt like plastic. I hated them. I had never used a single one. I pulled down 3 of them, a beige tote, a structured black shoulder bag, and a clutch covered in crystals. I drove to a pawn shop 3 towns over. I didn't go to a consignment boutique. Those places took weeks to pay out and often required an account. I needed money today. The pawn shop smelled of stale cigarettes and floor cleaner. The man behind the counter was thick-necked and stared at my grease-stained hands. I still hadn't gotten all the oil off from the tire change. "Help you?" he grunted. I placed the 3 bags on the glass counter. "I want to sell these." He looked at the bags, then at me. He picked up the beige tote, opening it, checking the lining, sniffing the leather. He was looking for fakes. He was looking for a reason to say no. "They're real," I said, my voice defensive. "They've never been used. The tags are still in the inside pockets." He grunted again. He spent 5 minutes typing on his computer, ignoring me. I stood there, feeling the shame burn my cheeks. I was Mrs. Gavin Foster, who lived in a 5-bedroom house, and I was pawning handbags to afford my freedom. "I can give you $400 for the lot," he said, not looking up. "$400?" I choked. "The black one alone retails for $2,000. The receipt is in the side pocket." "I ain't retail," he said, finally meeting my eyes. His gaze was flat, indifferent. "I got overhead, $400. Take it or leave it." I looked at the bags. I thought about Priscilla's smug face when she gave them to me. "This will elevate your look, dear." If I walked out, I had nothing. If I took the deal, I was getting ripped off, but I would have $400 that Gavin didn't know about. "Cash," I said. "I want cash." He counted out $20 bills. I took them. I didn't count them back. I shoved the money into my pocket and walked out, feeling lighter. I had just sold Priscilla's expectations for 20 cents on the dollar, and it was the best deal I had ever made. I didn't dare do my research at home. Gavin was an IT control freak. He bragged about his firewall settings. He monitored the Wi-Fi traffic. If he saw searches for forensic accounting or divorce attorney, the game would be over before it started. So I became a regular at the public library. It was a drab brick building with flickering fluorescent lights and carpet that smelled like wet wool. I chose a computer in the back corner, the one with the sticky keyboard and the monitor that hummed. I put in $5 for a guest pass. I didn't use my library card. My library card was linked to our home address. I started typing. First, the number. 555-0119-2844. I paid $10 to a sketchy reverse lookup site using a prepaid Visa card I'd bought with the pawn shop money. The screen buffered. A loading circle spun for what felt like an hour. I looked over my shoulder. A teenager was reading a manga 3 rows away. An old man was asleep over a newspaper. No one was watching me, but my skin prickled anyway. I felt like I had a neon sign over my head that said, "Wife planning escape." The result popped up. Owner Veronica Miller. Address 420 Oak Street, Apt 3B. Age 26. Veronica, not Brianna. Brianna was the text from the notification. Veronica was the phone number in the logs. There were 2 of them, or had he moved on? I felt a wave of nausea. I swallowed it down. I opened a new tab. Is infidelity grounds for asset forfeiture in divorce? The answer was a resounding no. In our state, it was a no-fault jurisdiction. Cheating meant nothing legally. He could sleep with the entire city, and the judge would still split our assets 50-50. Or worse, if he had a prenup, which we did, I would get whatever pittance was written in the contract 5 years ago. I pulled up the prenup terms from my memory. Wife retains assets brought into the marriage. Spousal support waived if marriage lasts less than 10 years. I had brought nothing into the marriage. I would leave with nothing, unless, I typed again, exceptions to prenup enforcement. The list was short. Coercion, duress, fraud. Fraud. If he was hiding money, the prenup could be voided. If he was using marital funds to facilitate a crime, the judge could strip him of his protections. I sat back in the creaky chair. Infidelity wasn't enough. I needed to prove he was a criminal. I needed to prove he was stealing. I looked at the clock on the wall. I had been here for 2 hours. I needed to get home before Priscilla came over to check on the curtains. I wiped the browser history, restarted the computer, and walked out into the sunlight, squinting against the glare. The world looked exactly the same, but the filter over my eyes had changed. I wasn't looking for love anymore. I was looking for a felony. It was Tuesday. Taco Tuesday, though we never ate tacos because Gavin said they were messy. We had grilled salmon. After dinner, Gavin went into his home office and shut the door. "I have to take a call with the structural engineer," he said. "Don't disturb me." Usually I would go to the living room and watch TV with the volume low. Tonight I went to our bedroom. Our bedroom shared a wall with his office. The house was old, a classic colonial that Gavin had renovated. He had spent a fortune on soundproofing the media room, but he had skimped on the insulation between the office and the master suite because who's going to listen? Me. I was going to listen. I turned off the lights in the bedroom so no shadows would move under the door. I sat on the floor, pressing my ear against the cold plaster. At first it was just a murmur, the deep rumble of his voice. I couldn't make out the words. I crawled to the spot where the air vent connected the 2 rooms. It was faint but clearer here. "Don't give me that numbers crap, Leo." Leo, that was his old partner, the one who disappeared from the company 2 years ago. "I don't care what the soil report says." Gavin's voice rose. He sounded angry. "The Ridgeview deal closes on the 1st. If we delay for foundation work, the buyers walk." Silence. Leo was speaking on the other end. "Then fix the report," Gavin snapped. "I'm not asking you to perform a miracle. I'm asking you to change a paragraph. Delete the section about the water table. Say the bedrock is stable." My breath hitched. I clamped a hand over my mouth. "No one is going to check," Gavin continued. "The city inspector is friendly. I took care of him last week. Just get the paper to look clean. We form the LLC, we sell the building, and we dissolve the company. By the time the basement floods, we're ghosts. That's how it works, Leo. That's how we get rich." He laughed, a short bark of a laugh. "Stop being a Boy Scout. Do you want your payout or not? Good. Send me the revised PDF by morning." He hung up. I sat in the dark, my heart pounding so hard I thought he must be able to hear it through the wall. This wasn't just hiding money. This was faking safety reports. By the time the basement floods. He was selling a dangerous building to people who would work there, shop there. He didn't care if the building collapsed as long as the check cleared. I wasn't married to a cheater. I was married to a sociopath. I waited until I heard Gavin snoring. It was a rhythmic, arrogant sound, the sleep of a man who had no conscience to keep him awake. I crept out of bed and went to the kitchen table. I didn't dare go into the office. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder on the desktop. I needed a name that would bore him to death if he ever looked. Receipts was too obvious. Divorce was suicide. I typed, "Garden Plans 2024. Gavin hated gardening. He called it playing in the dirt. He wouldn't click on a folder about hydrangeas and mulch. Inside the folder, I created a Word document. I typed the date. October 14th. I typed what I had heard, word for word. Subject, Ridgeview Commercial Plaza. Issue, foundation water table instability. Action, Gavin ordered Leo, partner, to falsify soil reports, admitted to bribing city inspector. Quote, "We form the LLC, we sell the building, and we dissolve the company. We're ghosts." I stared at the words on the screen. They looked clinical, black pixels on a white background, but they felt radioactive. I saved the document. Then I password protected the specific file. I used the name of my first pet, Buster, a dog Gavin never knew about because he never asked about my childhood. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The panic was still there, buzzing in the background like a refrigerator, but the foreground was clear. I had a mission. I was a spy in my own home. I wasn't just the wife anymore. I was the witness. The next morning, I was bold, or maybe stupid. Gavin was at work. I was in the living room, my laptop open on the coffee table. I was trying to find out who the city inspector for the Ridgeview district was. I had a map of the zoning districts open in one tab and a list of municipal employees in another. I was so focused on cross-referencing names that I didn't hear the front door unlock. "Cecilia!" "Yoo-hoo!" The voice came from the foyer. "Priscilla." I slammed the laptop shut so hard it sounded like a gunshot. Priscilla walked into the living room carrying a basket of muffins. She stopped, looking at me, then at the computer. "Goodness," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You're jumpy today. Guilty conscience?" She laughed lightly, implying that my only possible guilt would be eating a cookie before dinner. "Hi, Priscilla," I said, standing up too quickly. My knee knocked against the table. I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," she said. She walked over and set the muffins down on top of my closed laptop. I used my key. I knocked, but you were in a trance. What were you working on? That little design thing again? "Yes," I lied. "Just invoices." "Invoices," she repeated, making the words sound like garbage. She looked around the room. Her eyes landed on a stack of mail I hadn't sorted yet on the side table. "Cecilia, really?" she sighed, walking over to the mail. "The clutter. It creates chaotic energy. Gavin needs a sanctuary, not a post office." She started rifling through the envelopes. Bill, junk. "Oh, this looks official." She held up a letter from the bank. It was addressed to Gavin, but it was from a bank we didn't use. My heart stopped. I hadn't seen that one come in. "That's probably just a credit card offer," I said, stepping forward. "I'll take it." It feels thick, Priscilla said, tapping it against her nail. Maybe it's important. I should probably leave it on his desk for him. She turned toward the office. If she went into the office, she might see the notes I had left on the desk, the sticky note with the zoning map URL. I had forgotten to throw it away. Priscilla, wait! I lunged forward, grabbing the coffee mug sitting on the table. I tripped over the rug. I sent the mug of lukewarm coffee flying. It splashed across the white sofa cushion and onto the Persian rug. "Oh my God!" I shrieked. Priscilla spun around. Her eyes went wide with horror. The bank letter was forgotten in her hand as she stared at the brown stains spreading on the fabric. "Cecilia," she gasped, "that is Italian silk." "I'm so sorry," I stammered, dropping to my knees and frantically dabbing at the stain with a throw pillow, making it worse on purpose. "I'm so clumsy, I tripped." "Stop!" Priscilla snapped. She dropped the mail on the table and rushed over to push my hands away. "You're rubbing it in. Good Lord, you are useless with fine things. Go get the sparkling water from the kitchen, now." I ran to the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, shaking. I had ruined a $4,000 sofa, but the bank letter was on the table and she wasn't going into the office. I grabbed the sparkling water and forced myself to look upset. I wasn't upset. I was thrilled. I would burn the whole house down if it meant keeping my cover. Finding Leo Pritchard wasn't as easy as typing his name into a search bar. Gavin had scrubbed him from the company website years ago, erasing him so thoroughly it was like the man had never existed. I knew he lived in the city, somewhere in the industrial district that Gavin called the Rust Belt. I found his address in an old physical phone book I dug out of the attic, a relic from before Gavin decided everything needed to be digital and trackable. I told Gavin I was going to the outlet mall. "I need new linens," I lied. "The guest room towels are looking drab." "Fine," he grunted, not looking up from his tablet. "Just don't buy anything cheap. I don't want scratchy towels." I drove for 45 minutes, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. Every time a black SUV appeared in my rearview mirror, my heart seized. Was it him? Was it a private investigator? Priscilla had friends everywhere. If she saw my car parked on this street, a street lined with cracked pavement and chain-link fences, she wouldn't think I was buying towels. She would think I was buying drugs. I parked 3 blocks away from the address. I locked the car manually, checking the handle twice. Leo's building was a converted warehouse, the brick crumbling and covered in graffiti. There was no doorman. There was just a buzzer with a piece of masking tape next to it that said, "Pritchard." I stood there for a long time. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I thought about turning back. I could go to the mall, buy the expensive towels, and go home to my safe, suffocating life. I could pretend I never heard the phone call about the soil reports, but then I remembered the way Gavin had laughed when he said, "We're ghosts." He didn't just ruin buildings, he ruined people. I pressed the buzzer. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, holding it down for 5 seconds. A voice crackled through the speaker, distorted and angry. "What?" "Leo?" I asked. "Leo Pritchard?" "Who's asking?" "My name is Cecilia," I said, my voice trembling. I'm Gavin Foster's wife." The silence that followed was heavy. Then the speaker clicked off. He wasn't buzzing me in. He was ignoring me. I didn't leave. I couldn't. I sat on the concrete steps of the building, hugging my knees. It was starting to rain again, because of course it was. The universe seemed determined to make this investigation as miserable as possible. 2 hours passed. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Priscilla. "Did you find the Egyptian cotton? Make sure the thread count is over 600. I didn't reply. Finally, the metal door creaked open. A man stepped out. He looked older than the photos I'd seen from the early days of the company. His hair was gray and thinning, his face lined with the kind of deep grooves that come from years of grinding your teeth. He held a cigarette in one hand and a bag of trash in the other. He stopped when he saw me. He looked me up and down, his eyes narrowing. "You're still here," he said flatly. "I need to talk to you," I said, standing up. My legs were stiff. I have nothing to say to a Foster, he spat. He walked to the dumpster and tossed the bag in. Go home to your mansion, lady. Go spend your husband's blood money. It's not blood money, I said, following him. It's fraud money, and I want to prove it. Leo stopped. He turned around slowly. He took a drag of his cigarette, the embers glowing bright orange against the gray sky. You're wearing a coat that costs more than my rent, he observed, and you want me to believe you're suddenly growing a conscience? I'm not growing a conscience, I said, the words spilling out before I could filter them. I'm growing a spine. I heard him, Leo. I heard him talking about Ridgeview, about the soil reports, about dissolving the LLCs. Leo laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. Ridgeview, he shook his head. He's pulling that scam again? The man is a creature of habit. Please. I stepped closer. I know he pushed you out. I know he stole your share of the company. If you help me, I can take him down. I can get you justice. Leo flicked the cigarette butt into a puddle. It hissed. I don't want justice, he said. I want peace. Gavin destroys everything he touches. If I help you, he'll come for me again. I'm done. Get off my property before I call the cops. He turned back to the door. He's cheating on me, I yelled. It was pathetic playing the scorned wife card, but it was all I had left. He's going to leave me with nothing, just like he did to you. Leo paused with his hand on the door handle. He didn't look back, but he didn't go inside either. Wait here, he grumbled. He came back 5 minutes later carrying a cardboard box. It was an old liquor box, taped shut with duct tape that was peeling at the edges. He shoved it into my chest. It was heavy, smelling of mildew and old toner. I saved this, he said, his voice low. I don't know why. Maybe I thought one day the feds would come knocking and I could trade it for immunity, but nobody ever came. I gripped the box, feeling the cardboard dampen in the rain. What is it? The early days, Leo said. Before he got sophisticated, emails he thought he deleted, original invoices from the consultants who were really just city officials taking bribes. It shows the pattern. It shows how he builds the shell companies. Thank you, I breathed. Don't thank me, Leo said grimly. That box is a grenade. If he finds it in your house, he won't just divorce you. He'll ruin you. He'll make sure you never work again. He'll make sure your own family doesn't recognize you. He looked at me with something like pity. You're swimming with a shark, lady, and you're bleeding. I drove home with the box in the trunk, covered by a blanket. The paranoia was worse now. Every time the car bumped over a pothole, I imagined the box sliding, the tape breaking, the evidence spilling out. When I got home, Gavin wasn't there. Thank God. I had to hide it. I couldn't put it in the office. I couldn't put it in the closet. Priscilla looked in my closets. I carried the box to the basement. We had a storage room filled with holiday decorations, plastic Christmas trees, boxes of ornaments, wreaths. Gavin never went in there. He hated holidays. I opened a bin labeled Halloween decorations. I took out the plastic skeletons and fake spider webs. I put the box at the bottom of the bin and piled the decorations back on top. It was fitting, I thought, as I snapped the lid shut. The skeletons in Gavin's closet were literally hiding under the plastic skeletons in his basement. 2 days later, Priscilla called. Clear your afternoon, darling, she chirped. I'm taking you to lunch. Just the girls. I couldn't say no. Saying no to Priscilla was like saying no to a hurricane. She picked me up in her Bentley. We didn't go to the bistro we usually frequented. We drove to a medical park on the north side of town. Where are we going? I asked, gripping my purse. A surprise, she smiled. She pulled up in front of a building that said Advanced Fertility Solutions. My stomach dropped. Priscilla, I don't... Hush, she said, cutting the engine. Gavin mentioned you've been feeling unfulfilled. And let's be honest, Cecilia, you're 30. The clock is ticking. Gavin needs a legacy. He works too hard to leave his empire to a distant cousin. She opened her door and got out. I sat there, frozen. This wasn't lunch. This was an inspection. They wanted to check the livestock. I followed her inside, my legs feeling like lead. The waiting room was plush and silent. Priscilla marched up to the desk. "Mrs. Foster and Mrs. Foster," she announced. "We have an appointment with Dr. Aris." "Priscilla," I hissed, pulling her arm. "I didn't agree to this. I'm not ready." She turned on me, her eyes flashing cold and hard. The mask slipped for a second. "It's not about what you're ready for, Cecilia. It's about what is required. You have one job in this family. You don't work. You don't bring in money. You don't have connections. So you need to provide the heir. Otherwise, what exactly is the point of you?" The words hung in the air, brutal and precise. I wanted to slap her. I wanted to scream that I was building a case that would put her precious son in prison, but I couldn't. Not yet. I lowered my voice, forcing tears into my eyes. "I'm scared it won't work." "And then you'll be disappointed." Priscilla softened instantly. She loved weakness. It made her feel powerful. "Oh, honey," she cooed, patting my cheek. "That's why we're here. Dr. Aris is a miracle worker. We'll get you checked out, maybe get you on some hormones to speed things along. You'll be a mother by Christmas." I went through with the appointment. I let the doctor poke and prod me. I answered the humiliating questions while Priscilla sat in the corner, nodding approvingly. When we left, I felt hollowed out. I felt violated. But I also felt a new burning resolve. I wasn't going to give them a baby. I was going to give them a subpoena. I waited until 3 in the morning. Gavin was asleep. The house was silent. I crept down to the basement and retrieved a handful of documents from the Halloween bin. I brought them to the kitchen table, using a small flashlight instead of the overhead lights. I spread them out. Invoices, bank transfers, emails printed on thermal paper that was starting to fade. I looked at a bank statement from 2018. Transfer out $50,000 to Consulting Group Alpha. Transfer in $48,000 from Alpha Holdings. Why send money out just to get it back? I rubbed my eyes. I was a graphic designer. I understood color theory and typography. I didn't understand money laundering. The numbers swam before my eyes. I put on my headphones and opened my laptop. I went to YouTube. I searched for how to trace shell companies and forensic accounting basics. I watched a video by a guy who looked like a bored college professor. "Layering," he explained. "The goal is to move the money enough times that it becomes impossible to trace the original source. Each transfer cleans the money a little bit more." I looked at the documents again. Gavin wasn't just hiding money from me. He was hiding the source of the money. Transfer to Consulting Group Alpha. Invoice from Consulting Group Alpha for zoning research. There was no zoning research. It was a loop. He was paying himself, generating a fake expense to lower his taxes, and then pocketing the money on the other side. I grabbed a notebook. I started drawing a diagram. Gavin, LLCA, LLCB, offshore account, personal account. The complexity was terrifying. If I made a mistake, if I accused him of the wrong thing, his lawyers would tear me apart. I needed to understand this perfectly. I sat there until dawn, teaching myself the language of fraud, feeling the weight of the conspiracy pressing down on my chest. I wasn't just fighting a bad husband, I was fighting a machine. Friday night, Gavin insisted we go to Le Jardin, the most expensive French restaurant in the city. He was in a good mood. He had just closed a deal on a new property, another potential disaster in the making. "Order the lobster," he said, taking a sip of his wine. "Celebrate with me." I ordered the soup. I couldn't eat. My stomach was a knot of anxiety. When the check came, Gavin tossed his platinum card onto the tray without looking. He was busy typing on his phone, probably texting Veronica. The waiter returned a minute later. He looked uncomfortable. "Sir," he said softly, "I'm afraid the card was declined." Gavin stopped typing. He looked up, his face darkening. "Excuse me?" "The machine rejected it," the waiter said, holding the card with 2 fingers. "Do you have another form of payment?" "That's impossible," Gavin snapped. His voice carried. People at the next table looked over. "That card has a $100,000 limit. Try it again." "I did, sir, twice." Gavin snatched the card back. "It's your machine. Your system is down." "I can try another card," the waiter suggested. Gavin fumbled for his wallet. He was flustered. The arrogant facade cracked for a second. "Here," he threw a corporate card on the table. "Use this one." While he was arguing, his phone was sitting on the table, unlocked. He had opened the banking app to check the balance. I didn't move my head. I moved my eyes. The screen was bright. I saw the dashboard. Checking. $400. $400? Where was the money? He made millions. Then I saw the recent transaction list below the balance. Transfer to V. Miller, $5,000. Transfer to Archway LLC, $20,000. Transfer to Cayman Holdings, $50,000. He was draining the accounts. He was moving everything. "It went through," the waiter said, relieved. Gavin grunted, shoving his phone into his pocket before I could see more. But I had seen enough. He wasn't just hiding money for the future. He was liquidating. He was preparing for something big. Maybe he knew the walls were closing in. Maybe he was planning to leave me and disappear. I took a sip of water, my hand shaking. "Is everything okay?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Is it a bank error?" "Glitch," Gavin muttered, refusing to meet my eyes. "Just a stupid glitch." It wasn't a glitch. It was a getaway plan, and I was running out of time. I found the receipt on a Saturday. Gavin had taken the Mercedes to the car wash, but he complained that they didn't do the crevices right. He handed me a microfiber cloth and a bottle of detailing spray. "Touch it up for me, will you?" he said, patting my shoulder. "You have such small hands. You can get into the vents better than I can. Consider it your cardio for the day." He went inside to watch football. I stood in the driveway, holding the spray bottle, fighting the urge to throw it through the windshield. I started cleaning. I wiped the dashboard. I cleaned the vents. Then I opened the glove compartment. It was mostly empty. Insurance papers, manual, a tire gauge. But tucked into the back, wedged behind the cabin air filter access panel, was a slip of paper. I pulled it out. It was from Garrick Jewelers, dated yesterday. Item: diamond tennis bracelet 3E. Price $4,500. I stared at the number. $4,500. 3 years ago, when my car needed a new transmission, Gavin had told me we couldn't liquefy the assets to pay for it. He made me drive with a slipping gear for 6 months, but he had $4,000 for Veronica. I didn't cry. The tears were gone, dried up by the heat of my anger. Instead, I felt a cold, mathematical clarity. That wasn't his money. It was marital funds. Legally, half of that bracelet belonged to me. He had stolen $2,250 from me to decorate his mistress. I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of the receipt. I checked the metadata to ensure the location and time were stamped. Then I put the receipt back exactly how I found it. I finished cleaning the car. I polished the leather until it squeaked. When I went inside, Gavin asked if I was done. "It's spotless," I said. "Good girl," he said, not looking away from the TV. "Make me a sandwich, would you?" I went to the kitchen and made the sandwich. I added extra mustard, which he hated. It was petty, but it was the only power I had in that moment. The real horror didn't hit me until Tuesday. Gavin was drunk. He had come home from a client dinner, stumbling and smelling of scotch. He went straight to bed, leaving his briefcase open on the dining room table. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. When the snoring started, I moved. I riffled through the briefcase, contracts, blueprints, angry letters from subcontractors. Then I found a file folder labeled Ridgeview Financing, Phase 2. I opened it. Inside was a loan application for a bridge loan of $200,000. I scanned the pages. Borrower, Ridgeview Holdings, LLC. Guarantor, Gavin Foster. I turned to the last page. There were 2 signature lines, one for Gavin and one for me. Guarantor spouse, Cecilia Bennett. And there, in blue ink, was my signature. I stopped breathing. I traced the loops of the C with my finger. It was perfect. The way I crossed my T's, the slight slant to the right. It looked exactly like the signature on my driver's license. But I hadn't signed this. I had never seen this document in my life. I felt the room tilt. This wasn't just hiding money anymore. This was framing me. If the Ridgeview project collapsed, and I knew from the soil reports that it would, the bank wouldn't just come after the LLC. They would come after the guarantors. They would come after me. "Oh my God," I whispered. He wasn't just planning to leave me broke. He was planning to leave me with his debt. He was setting me up to be the fall guy for a $200,000 default. I took photos of the document. My hands were shaking so badly the first 2 were blurry. I had to rest my elbows on the table to steady the camera. I put the folder back. I closed the briefcase. I walked into the bathroom and vomited. I sat on the cold tile floor, wiping my mouth, realizing the scale of the trap I was in. I wasn't fighting for alimony. I was fighting for my life. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed a professional. I found Lydia Chen through a forum for forensic accounting. She didn't have a flashy website. She had a single page with a phone number and a quote, "The numbers never lie, but people do." Her office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. It didn't look like the kind of place that took down millionaires. I walked in wearing sunglasses and a scarf, terrified Priscilla was tracking my location. Lydia was a small woman with sharp eyes and no patience for small talk. She listened to my story without interrupting. She looked at the photos of the soil reports. She looked at the receipt for the bracelet. She looked at the forged signature. When I finished, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "You're in trouble," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why I'm here. I want a divorce." "This isn't a divorce case, Cecilia," she said, her voice hard. "This is a RICO case. This is racketeering, fraud, forgery. If that loan defaults and your signature is on it, the bank will sue you. You'll have to prove in court that you didn't sign it, and since you're married, the presumption is that you knew." "But I didn't." "Doesn't matter," Lydia said. "In the eyes of the law, you're partners, unless you can prove definitively that he is actively defrauding you." "I have the receipt," I said. "I have the soil report." "Circumstantial," she waved a hand. "He can claim you knew about the jewelry. He can claim the soil report was a draft. We need him to admit it. We need him to say, out loud, that he signed your name." "How?" "You have to record him," Lydia said. "In this state, you're a one-party consent jurisdiction. You can record a conversation as long as you are part of it." She slid a fee schedule across the desk. "My retainer is $5,000. I swallowed hard. I have $400 in cash." Lydia looked at me. She looked at the desperate set of my jaw. "I can't work for free," she said gently, "but I can take a payment plan if the evidence is strong enough. $400 down, but you need to get that recording. If you get him on tape admitting to the forgery, I'll take the case on contingency. If you don't—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I reached into my purse and pulled out the wad of bills I'd gotten from the pawn shop. I counted out $400. It was everything I had. "I'll get the recording," I said. I couldn't afford a high-tech spy bug. I went to an electronics store and bought a basic digital voice recorder for $30. It looked cheap, plastic and clunky. I also bought a roll of heavy-duty duct tape. That night, Gavin had a dinner meeting. I had 2 hours. I went into his office. I crawled under his massive mahogany desk. It was dark and dusty. I felt like a child playing hide and seek, except the seeker wanted to destroy me. I pulled out the recorder. I hit the record button to test it. The red light blinked. Blink, blink, blink. I taped it to the underside of the desk, right where his knees would be. I used strip after strip of tape, terrified it would fall. The adhesive smelled strong. Would he smell it? I sniffed the air. It smelled like chemicals. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of lemon wood polish, and sprayed the entire office. I polished the desk, the bookshelves, the floor. Mask the scent, I muttered to myself. Just cleaning, just being a good wife. I crawled back under the desk to check the recorder. It was holding. I sat back on my heels, my heart racing. If he found it, what would he do? He wouldn't hit me. Gavin wasn't violent like that. He was psychological. He would gaslight me. He would tell everyone I was paranoid, insane. He would have me committed. Priscilla would sign the papers. I can't let him find it, I whispered. I checked the battery life. 12 hours. I had 12 hours to get him to confess to a felony. The next morning, Gavin was working from home. He sat at the desk. I was in the hallway vacuuming. I needed a reason to be close to the office so I could hear if... Thump. It was a soft sound, a dull plastic clatter. The recorder. The tape had failed. It had fallen onto the carpet under the desk. Gavin stopped typing. "What was that?" he muttered. I saw him push his chair back. He was going to look down. Panic, hot and electric, shot through my veins. I didn't think. I just reacted. "Oh no!" I yelled. "Buster, no, no, no!" I burst into the office. Gavin jumped, spinning his chair around. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "The dog!" I pointed frantically at the hallway behind me. "He's about to throw up on the rug. Help me get him outside." We didn't have a dog named Buster. We had a golden retriever named Max. But in my panic, I used the password to my secret folder. Gavin looked confused. "Buster?" "Max," I corrected, my face burning. "I meant Max. He's gagging. Please, Gavin, it's the silk runner." Gavin groaned, standing up. God, that animal is useless. If he ruins the rug, he's sleeping in the garage. He stormed out of the office toward the back door. The second he was out of the room, I dove under the desk. I grabbed the recorder. I shoved it into the waistband of my yoga pants. I scrambled out and stood up just as Gavin walked back in. "The dog is fine," he said, looking annoyed. "He's sleeping in the sun. What are you talking about?" "Oh," I panted, clutching my chest. He must have swallowed it down. False alarm. I'm sorry, I just panicked." Gavin looked at me with disgust. "You are so chaotic, Cecilia," he said, shaking his head. "Always creating drama where there isn't any. You need to get your medication adjusted. You're manic." "I'm sorry," I said, backing out of the room. "I'll let you work." I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled the recorder out. My skin was burning where the plastic had pressed against me. I hit stop. I had failed. I didn't get the confession. I just nearly got caught. I needed a new plan. I couldn't record him passively. I had to record him actively. I had to wear the wire. I needed more leverage. The forged signature was good, but it was just paper. I needed physical proof that the building was dangerous. I drove to the Ridgeview Commercial Plaza. It was still under construction, surrounded by chain-link fences and keep-out signs. It was Saturday, so the crew was skeletal. I parked my car around the block at a strip mall. I walked over, wearing a hard hat and a high-vis vest I'd bought at a hardware store. I hoped I looked like an inspector, or maybe an architect. I slipped through a gap in the fence that Leo had told me about. The building was a concrete shell, 5 stories high. It looked impressive from a distance. Up close, it looked like a tomb. I walked toward the foundation wall on the north side, the side Leo said was sinking. And there they were. Cracks, not hairline fractures, deep, jagged fissures running up the concrete like veins of lightning. Someone had tried to fill them with epoxy, but the epoxy was cracking too. The earth was moving beneath the building, and the concrete couldn't hold. I pulled out my phone. I started taking pictures. The cracks. The water pooling in the basement excavation, the shifting soil. "Hey, you!" I froze. A security guard was walking toward me. He was big, wearing a uniform that was too tight. He had a radio in his hand. "This is a closed site," he barked. "Who are you?" My mind raced. I couldn't be Cecilia Foster. I couldn't be an inspector. I dropped my phone into my pocket. I slumped my shoulders. I took off the hard hat and let my hair fall messily around my face. "Oh my God," I said, pitching my voice high and breathy. "I am so lost. Is this the entrance to the Galleria?" The guard stopped. He looked at me, a confused woman in a vest that was clearly too big. "The Galleria?" he scoffed. "Lady, the mall is 3 miles east. This is a construction zone. Where did you get that vest?" "I found it by the gate," I lied. I thought maybe I had to wear it to walk through. My GPS is acting so weird. I'm just trying to find the Sephora." He rolled his eyes. The tension left his shoulders. He didn't see a threat. He saw a ditz. "You can't be here," he said, pointing to the gate. "Liability. You trip on a rebar. I gotta fill out paperwork for 3 hours. Get out." Okay, I said, backing away. "I'm sorry. Don't yell at me." I hurried toward the gap in the fence. "And leave the vest," he shouted. I stripped off the vest and dropped it on the dirt. I ran back to my car, my heart pounding. I checked my phone. The photos were clear. I had the forgery. I had the cracks. Now I just needed to survive the divorce. The night before the hearing, Gavin cornered me in the kitchen. I was rinsing a wine glass, his wine glass, when he slammed a folder onto the granite island. The sound made me jump, the glass slipping from my soapy fingers and shattering in the sink. "Leave it," he commanded, seeing me reach for a shard. "We need to talk." I turned off the faucet. My heart was hammering against my ribs, right against the strip of duct tape I had plastered to my sternum an hour ago. The cheap recorder was digging into my skin, warm and hard. I prayed the microphone wouldn't pick up the sound of my pulse. "What is this?" I asked, wiping my hands on a towel. "It's an offer," Gavin said, leaning against the counter. He crossed his arms, the picture of casual dominance. "A settlement. You sign this tonight and you walk away with $50,000 and the Corolla. No court, no lawyers, no public humiliation." "50,000?" I repeated. "Gavin, the house alone is worth $2 million. "The house is leveraged," he lied smoothly. "And frankly, Cecilia, 50,000 is more than you're worth. You brought nothing to this marriage. You're leaving with nothing. I'm being generous because I pity you." Pity. There it was, the weaponized sympathy. "I won't sign it," I said, stepping closer. I needed him to say it. I needed the confession. "I know about Ridgeview, Gavin. I know about the loan." His eyes narrowed. The air in the kitchen grew heavy. "You don't know anything," he sneered. "You're a graphic designer. You draw pictures. Leave the finance to the adults." "I saw the application," I pressed, my voice shaking just enough to sound terrified. "I saw my signature. You forged it, didn't you? You put my name on a $200,000 debt." Gavin laughed. He actually laughed. He walked over and poked a finger into my chest, right above the hidden recorder. "I didn't forge it, Cecilia. I executed it on your behalf. Because you're too risk-averse to understand how business works. I signed your name because if I asked you, you would have cried and asked questions you don't understand. I did it to protect our future. I did it because you're too stupid to do it yourself." I stood frozen. I felt the vibration of his voice in my chest. "I signed your name." "So you admit it?" I whispered. "You signed it without my permission?" "I'm the husband," he spat. "I don't need your permission to make us rich. Now sign the settlement or I will drag you through court until you can't afford a pack of gum." He turned and walked out. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade upstairs. Then I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and tore the tape off my skin. I screamed silently into a towel as the adhesive ripped away hair and skin. I hit rewind. I hit play. "I signed your name because you're too stupid to do it yourself." It was clear. It was perfect. It was the nail in his coffin. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and fear. We were back in the present. Scene 1. The photographers were outside, but in here, It was just the players. Damien, Gavin's shark of a lawyer, was pacing in front of the judge's bench. He looked like he cost $600 an hour, which he did. "Your Honor," Damien boomed, "this is a simple case of a gold digger engaging in extortion. Mrs. Foster has contributed zero capital to the marital estate. She has refused to work. She has spent thousands on personal luxuries." He waved a stack of receipts. My grocery receipts. The receipts for the clothes Priscilla made me buy. She is now attempting to claim ownership of complex business assets she doesn't understand, purely to spite my client. I sat at the table next to Lydia. My hands were folded in my lap. I looked at Gavin. He was scrolling on his phone, looking bored. Priscilla was in the row behind him, shaking her head sadly, performing her role of the disappointed matriarch. "Cecilia is a lovely girl," Priscilla whispered loudly enough for the stenographer to hear. "But she's not well, mentally." Lydia didn't object. She just tapped her pen on her notebook. "Let them talk," Lydia had told me earlier. "Let them dig the hole deep." Judge Garrison, a man with thick glasses and a tired expression, looked over his spectacles at me. "Mrs. Foster," he said, "do you have a response to these characterizations?" I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. "I do, Your Honor," I said, "but I think the financial records speak louder than I can." Damien scoffed. "Financial records? We've provided everything. The estate is liquidating." "Not everything," Lydia said, standing up. She didn't shout, she didn't pace. She just lifted the cardboard box, Leo's box, onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this?" Judge Garrison asked, leaning forward. "This," Lydia said, opening the lid, "is the history of the Ridgeview Commercial Plaza and 7 other LLCs that Mr. Foster failed to disclose in discovery." Gavin stopped scrolling. His head snapped up. "Your Honor," Damien interrupted, "this is an ambush." "We haven't seen these documents." "You haven't seen them because your client hid them," Lydia countered. She pulled out a document. "Your Honor, Mr. Foster claims the Ridgeview project is a standard development, but we have soil reports, the original ones, showing the foundation is built on a sinkhole." The room went quiet. Judge Garrison frowned. "A sinkhole?" "Yes," Lydia continued, "and we have bank records showing that Mr. Foster paid a city inspector $15,000 to bury that report." Priscilla gasped. "That is a lie. My son is a pillar of this community." "Mrs. Foster," the judge snapped. "Silence in the gallery." He turned his gaze to Gavin. "Mr. Foster, did you pay a city inspector?" Gavin stood up, adjusting his tie. He looked confident, but I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip. "Absolutely not, Your Honor. My wife, she's confused. She doesn't understand consulting fees. I pay consultants to expedite paperwork. It's standard industry practice." "Is it standard practice to forge your wife's signature on the loan documents for that sinkhole?" Lydia asked. The air left the room. Gavin blinked. "Excuse me?" "The bridge loan," Lydia said, holding up the photo I had taken in the dining room. $200,000, guaranteed by Cecilia Foster. Did she sign this?" Gavin looked at Damien. Damien looked confused. He hadn't known about the forgery. Gavin had lied to his own lawyer. Gavin stammered. We signed many papers together. It was a chaotic time. If her signature is there, she signed it." He looked at me. His eyes were pleading, begging me to play the role one last time. Be the good wife. Be the stupid wife. Save me. I looked back at him, and I felt nothing. The love was dead. The fear was dead. There was only the math. "I didn't sign it," I said clearly. "She's lying," Gavin said, his voice rising. "She forgets things. She faints." "My mother can testify to her mental state." "Yes," Priscilla stood up again. "She's hysterical. She imagines things." "Your Honor," Lydia said, her voice cutting through the noise like a razor, "we have a recording." "Objection!" Damien shouted. "Illegal wiretap." "One-party consent state," Lydia replied calmly, "recorded by Mrs. Foster in her own home during a conversation with her husband." She placed the cheap digital recorder on the table next to the microphone. She pressed play. The courtroom speakers crackled. Then Gavin's voice filled the room, loud and arrogant. "I didn't forge it, Cecilia. I executed it on your behalf. I signed your name because you're too stupid to do it yourself." The silence that followed was absolute. Gavin froze. He looked like a statue of a man who had just realized he was standing in front of a firing squad. Damien closed his eyes and sat down. He knew it was over, but the recording wasn't done. "I did it to protect our future. I did it because you're too stupid." Judge Garrison's face turned a deep, angry red. He looked from the recorder to Gavin. "Mr. Foster," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet, "did I just hear you admit to bank fraud and identity theft in my courtroom?" Gavin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It was taken out of context," Priscilla shrieked. She pushed past the bar, stumbling into the well of the court. "He was helping her. She's incompetent. He had to do it." "Bailiff!" the judge shouted. "Control the gallery!" "You can't do this," Priscilla screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "After everything we gave you, the clothes, the house, you ungrateful little stray." The mask of benevolence was gone. She wasn't the caring mother-in-law anymore. She was a monster in a Chanel suit, baring her teeth. "I've heard enough," Judge Garrison said, slamming his gavel. "This hearing is suspended." He looked at the bailiff. "Take Mr. Foster into custody. I am holding him in contempt, and I am referring this evidence immediately to the district attorney and the FBI." "Custody?" Gavin's voice cracked. No, I have a meeting. You can't." The bailiff, a large man who looked like he didn't care about real estate development, walked over and pulled Gavin's hands behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. "Mom!" Gavin panicked. "Mom, call the governor. Call someone." Priscilla was sobbing, clutching her pearls. I can't. My heart." "And Mrs. Foster," the judge added, looking at Priscilla, "if you are listed on the board of these LLCs, I suggest you find criminal counsel. Now get out of my courtroom." Gavin was dragged out the side door. He looked back at me one last time. He didn't look angry. He looked small. He looked like a child who had finally been told no. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I looked at Lydia. "Did we win?" I asked. Lydia smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "We didn't just win, Cecilia. We scorched the earth." I walked out of the courtroom. The photographers were waiting. Priscilla was in the hallway arguing with a federal agent who had just arrived. She looked at me, her mascara running, her face twisted in hate. I didn't stop. I didn't take a tissue. I didn't count the cameras. I walked past them, out the heavy double doors, and into the sunlight. I had $400 in my pocket and a beat-up car with a spare tire. I was broke. I was alone. And I had never been happier. I wish I could say I'm writing this from a beach in Italy, drinking wine paid for by a massive settlement. I'm not. The reality of justice is slower and messier than the movies. Because the assets were tied up in fraud, the government froze everything. The millions Gavin had, gone. Seized to pay back the banks, the city, and the investors he scammed. I didn't get a huge payout. I got the Corolla and about $15,000 from the sale of the furniture before the feds locked the house. Gavin. He is currently in federal holding awaiting trial. He was denied bail because the judge considered him a flight risk, thanks to that Cayman transfer I saw. He's facing 15-20 years for wire fraud, bank fraud, and bribery. He calls me sometimes from jail. I don't answer. Priscilla. This is the best part. It turns out she was the silent partner in the shell companies. She wasn't just his mom, she was the mastermind. She's under house arrest wearing an ankle monitor that clashes horribly with her wardrobe. The country club revoked her membership. The friends she tried to impress, they treat her like a leper. Me. I moved into a small apartment downtown. It's a studio. It has ugly carpet and a noisy radiator, but it's mine. I started freelancing again. I designed a logo last week for a bakery, the same one Gavin made me turn down years ago. I charged them double, and they paid it happily. I'm poor, I'm tired, I'm still dealing with lawyers. But every night I sleep for 8 hours straight. I don't listen to the walls. I don't count my breaths. I learned the hard way that freedom isn't free. It costs everything you have, but it's the only thing worth buying. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.